This is the Bandwagon, powered by Ram Trucks, a show about baseball and how the more you know that you don't know. I'm Hannah Keyser, baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Crizer, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. Zach, mostly what we're going to do this episode is you're going to teach me about pitch types, and then later we're going to talk about women's softball. But first, we had some actual newsy things to banter about. Wait, we did not put this on the rundown. Sorry, I'm audibling real quick. But the A's thing is not happening, but still might happen. Just yet another update on the A's moving to Vegas that is like, they didn't do the thing that needed to be done for them to move to Vegas, but it still looks like they're going to move to Vegas.
Yes, they keep assuming that public officials will just lie down and quickly do whatever it is they want them to do. And they keep being wrong about that, which is, really a statement about the A's that their pitches keep not working, which is consistent across the field and the boardroom.
Was that a pun about pitches and how sometimes they work better than other pitches? Because we will be discussing exactly that later.
Well, it was a pun about how the A's are bad at pitching.
It's a pun about baseball. It was like, it's a baseball term is pitching. What do you want to have happen? We don't actually have time to talk about it. I'm just curious, because I kind of feel like every time I see them get slightly thwarted, I feel like a little surge of Schadenfreude and but I don't actually know. I don't want them to have no home.
I want it to get so bad that John Fisher sells the team, and then whoever buys the team can sort out the answer. That's of course. Actually, yeah, I made it seem like it was difficult to figure out what the right answer is, but that's definitely the right answer. We are bandwagoning John Fisher getting so fed up with his inability to just have people give him money so that way he can spend less of all of his money to run his own business, that he's like, this sucks. I'm going to take all my money and not make more money off of it. If you want. Okay, the Padres are now being broadcast by Major League Baseball. That happened because, as you may have seen, again, this is one of those long, protracted business of baseball stories. Diamond Sports Group, the people who own Bally Sports, who broadcast many baseball teams, went bankrupt. They declared bankruptcy. There are, within the group of they own 14 teams. I should have written this down. They own, I think, 14 teams. Or they broadcast the
14
rights.
Teams. Sorry,
to 14
they own the rights
teams.
to 14 teams. They don't own the teams. That's part of the complication. They're each within that giant bucket of teams that are broadcast on Bally. There are a bunch of differences, and one of them is that the Padres own some level of the broadcast themselves, and so they, within this bankruptcy soup that has to wind its way through the courts, they were the first to in some ways get figured out. DSG, Diamond Sports Group, missed a rights fee payment, and MLB swooped in and was like, we'll be doing that from now on. So in court, Rob Manfred, Commissioner of Baseball, said that MLB got, quote, less than 24 hours notice that Diamond was not going to continue paying the Padres their rights fees. But I mean, this is the worst person made a great point where Rob Manfred is kind of on the right side in this situation, but don't let him trick you into thinking this completely came out of the blue. Major League Baseball has been, I don't know if we could say they've been plotting for this, but they've certainly been planning for this for years.
They've been maneuvering. And this is the most important thing to know long-term about the Bally Sports situation. The Bally Sports situation is messed up because Bally Sports paid way too much, way more than they could afford for the baseball rights. That's fine, whatever, bad business decision. The way this is working for MLB is ultimately a play to end blackouts and to make one big pay what you want, either for one team or all the teams, MLB TV service. And if you're seeing the Padres play out, it's obviously disjointed because of how it came about. But this is, I would say, not a fun step for people who live in San Diego right now, but a useful step in the overall larger baseball broadcast world.
Yeah, if you saw the news that's like Major League Baseball is taking over the broadcast of the Padres because of Bally Sports missing a rights fee payment because they've gone bankrupt, whatever, that makes it seem like it is sort of like a stopgap, like MLB was like, oh God, we got to step in. When in fact, even though it is currently only one of 29 teams, that is the future that MLB completely explicitly. They talked about this at Rob Manfred's sort of press availabilities in spring training. They have owners meetings next week in New York. I'm sure they will talk about it there, and it'll be on the following week's podcast. But yeah, Major League Baseball has been, and Rob Manfred specifically, has been totally upfront about the fact that the Bally Sports bankruptcy and some related but not related, like sort of similar but not related situations happening with other broadcast partners in which they're finding out that perhaps they're paying too much for broadcast fees. That MLB is sort of hoping to parlay those companies' failures into MLB being able to take back the broadcast rights and the direct-to-consumer rights for all of their teams so that they can put them on their little MLB TV service available to fans in market, which has been like a number one fan complaint for a long time, for as long as there's been MLB TV. If you are someone who doesn't want to have cable but wants to watch your baseball team, most likely you live near that baseball team and cannot do so unless you have cable. On the flip side, we should just say that like Bally Sports' position is that they really want the direct-to-consumer rights. They want to be able to stream games. They want to say, like, look, if we have the television broadcast of the Minnesota Twins, we also want to be able to provide a streaming option so they can cater to cable cord cutters. Their sort of claim is that MLB blocking them from doing that is part of why it's no longer a valuable proposition to have these team rights. They own 13 teams. I said 14. Diamond currently has the direct-to-consumer streaming rights for all of the NHL and NBA teams, and it has 5 of the 13 MLB teams. But basically the situation is like cable cutting is making cable rights fees less valuable and streaming fees more valuable. And so MLB is like, we should take back all of these rights so we can put them in like a convenient little a la carte package. And the cable rights team partners are like, no, we're going to need those streaming rights. There was like a big bankruptcy hearing in Houston this week over a couple of days that Rob Manfred spoke at, which gave us like a lot of insight into the animosity between Major League Baseball and Diamond Sports Group. But ultimately, all it was actually deciding was whether or not Diamond Sports Group could pay lower fees, whether they could get those fees reduced. And it was ruled that they couldn't. It was ruled that they have to pay what they originally agreed to, which is some incredible amount per team that is funding a lot of baseball right now, but also that they cannot afford to do. So basically what happened in the court this week was the judge ruled like, if you cannot pay the amount you originally agreed to, you're going to have to proceed with like bankruptcy and potentially getting out of this deal or something. That you cannot just say like, can we have these fees reduced? So that's the update there. And we're going to continue to get updates there because the Padres are only one baseball team. And at some point, all of these teams are going to run into the situation where either the broadcast partner doesn't want to pay what they have agreed to, or that contract runs out and they're in the position of, do they try to get another broadcast partner? Do they go back to Major League Baseball? It's going to take years, but the small picture is DSG still bankrupt, Padres on MLB TV. The massive picture is Rob Manfred is trying to address blackouts. So for that fan who shouted at him at the World Series, fix the blackouts, he heard you. He's working on it. I spent more time on that than I intended to. So what else is happening?
Aaron Judge ran through a wall, sort of, which sounds like a Kool-Aid Man thing that Aaron Judge would do in a cartoon, but he sort of did it for real at Dodger Stadium.
It was perhaps not worth it because now his toe is stubbed, but it was super cool. And it was the second incredible play he made. He had a home run robbery in Seattle, and then he this was not a home run robbery, but this was definitely like a clutch hit in a key situation robbery. Aaron Judge is as good as he was last year. That's the headline. That's all you need to know. Aaron Judge, still very good. And in fact, as good as he was last year. There have been tweets to this effect. There was a Jason Stark item in his various numbers, the columns, about how he's on pace for all sorts of things similar to last year. So it was not just a historic home run chase followed by now I'm old and I got my bag secured situation. You were very entertained by a play in a game in which a team won because of a walk-off wild pitch. Was it a walk-off wild pitch or was it just a game-deciding
wild pitch? Nope, it was a walk-off wild pitch. I would say I was not entertained. I was more like horrified. You know, it was sort of like when you see a car crash on the side of the road and you can't really stop looking at it. And then maybe the car catches on fire and then maybe the fire truck wrecks on its way to get the car that's on fire. This is the AL Central, everyone. The Chicago White Sox won a baseball game in which there were 3 runs and all of them scored on wild pitches. So incompetence all around. The Detroit Tigers hit the umpire in the face with a ball that an errant pitch. It bounced away and that allowed the winning run to score a walk-off. That was a weirder play than, they also got a win for Liam Hendricks in one of his first games back since returning from cancer, and that was great. But this game with the wild pitch walk-off was a real show of why the AL Central is such a mess, and I don't think it will have anything to do with deciding the division, but I don't know, the Tigers are actually kind of the second best team in that division, so it could, and that would be weird.
I like how you felt the need. Wait, I like how you felt the need to be like, they won a real game at some point in there. Yeah. They're not going to go 1-161 just because of this wild pitch. I agree. You texted me about this, and then my response to you was, "Oh wow, the AL Central is going to be decided by whichever team loses in the least embarrassing ways at some point." That's enough banter, right?
I think that's enough banter.
Well, actually, let me fake a banter such that I can transition into my game. Okay. Did you see that Albert Pujols, noted slugger who retired at the end of last season? Wait, first of all, I have to say, did you see that Albert Pujols broadcasted a baseball game? And so much of this broadcast was his fellow broadcasters being like, "You can still play, right?" And he was like, "Ha ha ha, no, I want to be retired."
I did not see that he broadcasted a game.
But that did happen. That's not what I was talking about. But I did think that was funny that like a lot of it was like, "You could grab a bat, right?" And he's like, "No, I'm tired. Let me sit during the baseball games from now on." In addition to doing some broadcast, he was recently named special assistant to the commissioner. He's going to focus on player relations, issues in the Dominican Republic. He will also serve as a MLB Network analyst. And this got me thinking about post-playing career jobs that baseball players have. So we're going to play a little quiz about that. I have no idea. Some of these might be easy and some of these might be impossible. Are you ready?
I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
They span all of baseball history, to be clear.
Oh, great.
All right. Question 1. Bill Kunkel, a relief pitcher in the 1960s for the Kansas City Athletics and the New York Yankees, is the last former player to hold what job in baseball? Like a baseball-related job.
Umpire?
Yes! Oh my gosh, how did you get that? Did you know
Sam
that?
Miller wrote about him. Sam Miller wrote about him. Yeah.
Damn. He only pitched for 3 years, but he officiated for almost 20, including in the NBA. All right, you're off to an incredible start. Number 2, after he retired, David Eckstein turned his attention to building a multi-million-dollar business with his wife, actress Ashley Eckstein. What is the business? I have multiple choices for this one because otherwise that would be impossible, and also because it was fun for me to come up with fake ones. Okay. Option A, they started a home renovation company that was recently turned into a show on HGTV called Home Sweet Home Run. Option B, they created a line of subtly platformed men's shoes that add 2 to 3 inches of height called Air Eckstein. Option 3, along with former teammate AJ Przinsky, they have a popular wrestling podcast called Brawling. Option D, they founded a company that produces fashion and accessory lines for female sci-fi fans called Her Universe.
I think it's the home renovation one.
No, but I'm glad that was convincing.
I don't know that it's any. I don't know which one it is.
It was D. They founded a company that produces fashion and accessories for female sci-fi fans. Sorry, that's like Star Wars themed women's wear. It has something to do with his wife's. I think she does like voiceover for some sci-fi show. The Sports Illustrated wrote about this in 2014, so it's legit. I'm glad that I fooled you with that because I spent a lot of time trying to think of what would be a good pun for a for a home renovation show run by a baseball couple. Okay, question 3. What did Mitch Williams, the relief pitcher known as Wild Thing, not do in retirement? Open a bowling alley, become a motivational speaker, sell a salsa that comes in mild and wild, coach Little League.
I feel like we wouldn't be able to know if he didn't coach. I think he did not open a bowling alley.
He did. He did not become a motivational speaker, but I put that one in there because he is most famous for going on a tirade while coaching Little League that got him fired from Major League Baseball Network, MLB Network. He got fired, and then he filed a wrongful termination suit. And then he won that. So maybe we should be careful. Allegedly, just apply that to something in there. Question 4. What did the catcher who Casey Stengel once described as, quote, the strangest man ever to play baseball do as his second career? A spy, a soldier, a tailor, a tinker, whatever that is.
It's a spy. This is Mo Berg.
Yes. I just wanted to do a tinker, tailor, soldier, spy. Mo Berg was a World War II spy. I spent a lot of time reading his Wikipedia page yesterday. I did not know about that beforehand. Apparently you did. Question 5. What product has Nolan Ryan not been in the business of since retiring from playing baseball? Turf, tobacco, beef, baseball gloves, or beer?
I feel like he retired a little too late to be in the tobacco business. I'll go tobacco.
No, he was in the tobacco business. It was beer. And I'm pretty sure. If he was in the beer business, I apologize. But he was definitely in the turf, tobacco, beef, and baseball gloves business. Okay. Which of the following is not a company that A-Rod lists himself as the CEO or co-founder of on his very active LinkedIn page? Jump, Mojo, Bop, or Slam?
I'll go with Bop.
You're right. I don't know what they do, but those are all companies that he lists himself as the co-founder of. He also lists himself as like shortstop for the Seattle Mariners and then has like a little date range in there, which is very cute. All right. What player famous for one particular World Series moment went on to be a truck driver who called himself Knight Rider? Jack Morris, Mookie Williams, Bill Buckner, or Kirk Gibson?
Bill Buckner.
Mookie Williams. Mookie Williams went on
Wilson.
Sorry. Mookie Wilson. I was conflating a bunch of names right there. That's probably why you didn't think it was that one, because I got it wrong. He went on to be a truck driver. He went to truck school, like truck driving school. Like this wasn't like I don't think this was like a sad situation. I think he like wanted to be a truck driver his whole life. He went to truck driving school and he told them that he was a school teacher and they called him the professor. And then he called himself Knight Rider. And they got interviewed about this in the New York Times at some point. Okay. Which of Randy Johnson's, this one's not multiple choice, so think about it. Which of Randy Johnson's Hall of Fame teammates also became a photographer in his second act?
Oh, no. Randy Johnson had a lot of teammates.
Yeah.
Oh, he's in the Hall of Fame?
He's in the Hall of Fame.
Okay. That's easier, I guess. It's not making it easier, though. Andy Pettit?
Ken Griffey Jr. takes racing photos. Like he's like a sports photographer and he does a lot of car racing photos.
Did not know that.
Neither did I, to be honest, until I looked into it. Okay. Which former pitcher turned professional musical artist? There's a handful of them. So this is not multiple choice. You're just going to have to know it. Which former pitcher turned professional musical artist had a 2017 album called No Secrets that appeared on the Billboard charts? Or at least had a song that appeared on the Billboard charts.
Okay, so the ones I'm thinking about are Barry Zito, Bronson Arroyo. There's someone I'm forgetting. I'm gonna guess Bronson Arroyo.
Oh, it was Barry Zito. I was like,
it was Barry Zito.
It was Barry Zito. All right, and this is your last question. Which 50-year-old former Cy Young Award winner recently had his agents clarify that actually he's not retiring from playing baseball?
Wait, say the age thing again?
I'm pretty sure he's... I'm like Googling. I'm like, I'm right about his age, right? Yes, he's 50. This 50-year-old pitcher. He's not in Major League Baseball anymore, but he is explicitly not retiring from baseball. He's still trying. Still out there. It'll make a lot of sense when you hear it.
Yeah, is it, I'll just guess like Jose Contreras, I don't know.
Bartolo Colon. Bartolo Colon was reportedly...
But they're having a retirement ceremony for him at the Mets.
He is not retiring, MLB Trade Rumors has learned via the pitcher's agents at Wasserman. That was 4:17 p.m. on June 3rd. So everybody reported that he was retiring, probably because he's having a retirement ceremony. And then his agents reached out to MLB Trade Rumors, and they were like, he's not retiring. He is still available to pitch at 50 years old. Bartolo
There
Colon.
should not be this many Bartolo Colon updates in 2023.
I didn't. I was like, did this just happen? I like that they had to include the timestamps. At 12:33 p.m., MLB Trade Rumors was like, 2005 AL Cy Young Award winner and former four-time All-Star Bartolo Colon is officially hanging up his glove, reports MLB insider Hector Gomez, now age 50, big sexy, hasn't pitched in the majors since the end of the 2018 season. And then at 4:17 p.m., they were like, Colon is not retiring, his agent said. Okay. I don't know how you did. You got at least the first one right, which was very impressive.
I got the spy.
You did get the spy.
3 of 10.
3 out of 10.
That's my worst performance yet, I think.
I was maybe the hardest quiz yet. And you know what? It was kind of hard to make too. So
it shouldn't have been harder than walk-up songs, but it absolutely was. I was expecting, you know what I was expecting? I was expecting to get a question about one of the many former players who now operate vineyards or wineries.
Oh.
It's very common. I believe among them, Rich Aurelia, who was Aaron Judge's favorite player growing up. Also, Kevin Youkilis is involved in something like that.
Relatedly, I almost was like, I Googled like former players who now own restaurants. And then I was like, okay, there's too many. We got it. Like everybody yes. owns a restaurant. Everybody owns like a wings bar or a, yeah. I read a very long story about Darryl Strawberry's restaurant in Queens, which I think is
as producer John points out, Youkilis might have a brewery, not a winery, but same industry.
Okay, I don't have a good way to get out of that, so now we're gonna do the sponsored segment.
Let's say that.
Get into a segment. I feel like they'll figure it out when we say that Built Different is powered by Ram trucks. Sometimes you just see a guy or team whose performance is game changing and think, "Wow, he's built different." Zach, I was gonna say who amazed you this week, but actually they've been amazing you for a long time because the little conceit, the unnecessary attempt to tie these two together that we're doing this week is teams that you and I both predicted were going to be good, and now they are. Wow. Who did you think was going to be good?
You could say that I'm not amazed at all, but I actually am a little bit amazed that the Arizona Diamondbacks are tied with the Dodgers atop the NL West. They did briefly have a tie for the best record in the National League in general. They lost that one to the Braves in a series this weekend, but they are a very good team, and it's mostly because of a collection of young players all kind of bubbling up together. They also made what looks right now to be a very savvy trade this offseason, sending Dalton Varsho to the Toronto Blue Jays for Gabriel Moreno, who's been great as a defensive catcher and hitter. Pretty good as a hitter, great as a defensive catcher. And also Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who's having his best season in the majors by like a mile. And combine that with, Corbin Carroll, who everyone thought was going to be amazing, being amazing. Zach Gallen, who you wrote about at Yahoo Sports, continuing to be an ace. He's probably the Cy Young favorite in the NL right now. And this is the type of team that you don't necessarily see coming, because it's just you need a bunch of young guys to progress together at once. And in the Diamondbacks case, they are. And I'm going to take the victory lap now so that if they do fall out of the playoff race, I don't have to think about it.
I don't believe in taking victory laps for preseason predictions, because it's like it falls into that. There's like a scientific theory about how, like, if you predict enough unlikely things, it becomes likely that one of them is going to happen.
I only predicted one unlikely thing, though, and this was it.
You didn't predict anything else?
Well, I predicted the Astros wouldn't make the playoffs, so we'll see how that plays out.
If that happens, you can take a victory lap. And I don't remember why I predicted this, other than to be contrary to what you thought. You did not think that the Rangers were good. And so I was like, the Rangers are good. And then actually you are the one who ended up writing about the fact that the Rangers are quite good. And you wrote about the fact that the Rangers are quite good because, not just because of the pitching, they spent all this money this past offseason on the pitching. Most notably, they got Jacob deGrom, but he's not even pitching. They got other guys who have been pitching well. And some of the pitchers they already had, like Martin Perez. But mostly what you wrote about was the fact that the offense has been incredible. Their little like roster resource rankings, they're first in average, first in on-base percentage, first in runs scored. But a more interesting way to say that is that they have the best run differential at this point in the season since the 1939 Yankees. They've scored at least 10 runs 16 times so far this season. I did not see that coming, and neither did their general manager. I was just listening to the Athletic podcast that had Chris Young on it, and he said, quote, "The offensive production so far, I don't think anybody could have predicted." So I feel okay about the fact that I didn't predict that. And if anybody did predict that out there, you actually should take a victory lap, because I just was basing this on, like, this is a team that spent a lot on free agency on the offensive side last offseason, and then this offseason they spent on pitching, and that just the combo of those things seems like they're investing a lot. It's interesting because there's been so much attention paid this season to teams that concentrated like all of their free agent spending this past year, and then that's not panning out. Whereas the Rangers, it is. We should look more at what the Rangers are doing. Also, they're hitting .336 with runners in scoring position, which is probably not going to hold up. But things that don't hold up that are really cool in the moment are some of my favorite things, because people love to be like, that's not real, it's not going to hold up. And it's like, well, those are separate things. It can still be real, even if it's not going to hold up. And a team that's really good with runners in scoring position, I'm not like a particular fan of the Texas Rangers, but I'm very happy for all the fans of the Texas Rangers, because a team that's really good with runners in scoring position sounds like a very satisfying team to watch play. You're like, wow, this feels like a big moment. And then they do a big thing. So that's cool. That was Built Different, powered by Ram Trucks, built to serve. Next week, we'll actually pick players who are built different. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and then come back with a conversation about pitch types. And then following that, women's softball. Those are not the same conversation. Okay, so this week for the main segment, we thought, well, you've spent however many hours looking at Baseball Savant and pitch types and just cramming your brain full of every piece of information related to every possible pitch type. And this was born a little bit out of, you were thinking about writing something about pitch types. And I believe I said something about how, like, for all that I know about whatever the most like relevant newsworthy topic is, like this guy's learning a new pitch or his pitch is not breaking as much as it used to, and that's why it's getting crushed or whatever. I never, because I didn't play baseball, I never learned the biggest, broadest picture of pitch types. Like, why do we have each of them? What are they good for? Like, how did they evolve? And so in a little bit of service to me and everybody else who is comfortable admitting that, you're doing a massive project on all the pitches? Yes.
Yeah, so I basically, in classic nerd fashion, wanted to write about, like, the difference between a changeup and a splitter and why a splitter is coming back, which I did yesterday. But I also heard from you, and as I started talking about this, I heard from a lot of people that I know who are baseball fans, but just don't necessarily know the nuances and the difference between when a guy throws a slider and a curveball, like what separates the two, let's say, and why would you pick one over the other? Why would you have both? You know, all these questions about when you see a pitch, what goes into calling it something for one, and how did it get to the point where the guy chose to use that on the mound? And so I have written it. It's not live as of recording, but it probably will be by the time you actually hear this podcast, is a field guide to how pitches work in 2023 and, this general era of baseball. And I think what has happened, especially this year, MLB and thus all the broadcasts that use MLB's classifications have started showing the sweeper. The sweeper really started to be a thing 2-3 years ago, and it has become an official type of pitch now. And what the sweeper is basically a slower slider that moves more to the side. You could also view a curveball as a slower slider, but it moves more to vertically. It moves down, and it's also thrown with a totally different grip, as you will find out in this story. But the sweeper showing up on the scene, I think, really woke people up to the idea of, wait a second, this is not like a set in stone, handed down from the baseball gods type situation. This is an evolving process of how pitchers create the things they throw and how they decide what to throw. Have you noticed people asking about the sweeper?
You know what's interesting? I've actually noticed so many broadcasts taking like a old man yells at kids on his yard approach to sweepers, which is part of what made me realize, like, I've heard a lot of broadcasts be like, is the sweeper even new? And I've been like, I don't know. Could you tell me? Like, why don't, you know what I mean? Like they're approaching it from this perspective of like, well, we already throw pitches that move laterally and we already throw pitches that are not fastball. You know what I mean? And that was sort of part of what made me be like, well, okay, but take a step back and like, rather than tell me why it's not a new thing, can we just talk about like what it is in relation to what already exists? And so you did that, which I really appreciated. So first of all, how would you, okay, so because that's something that I feel like has come up a lot. Why do some people say that sweeper isn't new, and why is it worth considering from a new, like, why is it worth calling it something new? And why do people not want to call it that? Like, why are people resistant to the idea that it's new?
I'll take the last part first, because I think we saw a very similar cycle of this like 4 years ago that has passed, and it'll show you how this will eventually pass too. When exit velocities first started coming out for batted balls, StatCast became a thing publicly in 2015. I would say exit velocity started showing up on every broadcast by 2017, 2018. And the initial reaction was, we don't need exit velocity. We can see how hard a ball is hit off the bat, which is true. You don't need exit velocity. No one is saying you absolutely have to use it. You can have both. It's just like a pitch velocity. You can see when a guy throws a very hard fastball, but would you also sometimes like to know if it hit 100 miles an hour? Of course you would. It's information that is there for the taking. So what happened with the sweeper is you could view it as just a particularly swervy, slurvy type of slider, which is exactly how people viewed pitches that would now be called sweepers. When Corey Kluber was winning Cy Youngs in Cleveland, he was throwing a sweeper. We just called it his breaking ball, but it's telling that we called it his breaking ball because no one could figure out which type of breaking ball it was. We couldn't decide if it was a curve or a slider. So if you want to keep calling it that, just and describe it in 18 words to everyone who asks what it is, you can do that. But we have a name for it now. It's the sweeper. And so you don't have to adjust and start calling things sweepers, but we have come up with a definition for it. Just as back in 1936, there was the first published description of a slider, called it a fastball that moved across the plate. And it's like, well, yeah, that's a different pitch. And it, like, within a few years, someone started calling it a slider, and now we have the slider. The same process in a much more data forward and much more precise way is happening with sweepers.
And you didn't just write about sweepers. Again, you sort of backed all the way up. And the first of a series of stories that you put out was about sliders, and specifically sliders overtaking, or not overtaking fastballs, sliders catching up to fastballs. The trend that people have written about in all sorts of very specific ways, again, blew it up to the big picture, which is like guys are throwing fewer fastballs relative to their other pitches lately. That's something that has been written about a lot in relation to specific teams or specific pitchers. So why are we seeing this sort of across the league, and will the slider ever overtake the fastball?
I'll give you the most basic, anyone can relate to it thing. If someone tosses you something that goes straight, you can catch it or hit it or do whatever you want with it. If they throw you something that bends in midair, it's harder. And that's what everyone in baseball has basically figured out in a much more complicated way, which is the slider, which most pitchers in baseball can throw effectively because it's a grip and spin-based pitch that you pretty much throw like a fastball. You don't have to do any weird arm motions to make it happen. If you can throw a slider fast, and a lot of guys can throw sliders in the upper 80s, low 90s right now, which is as fast as many fastballs were 10, 15 years ago, that pitch is harder to hit than a straight fastball, no matter really how good the straight fastball is. So more guys are leaning into the slider. The problem as to whether it will eventually overtake fastballs entirely is whether you can throw the slider in every area of the plate to get strikes, to get ahead in the count. And I think there's a very legitimate point to be made that maybe guys do not have the command, and maybe their sliders are not good enough to throw right down the middle of the plate and get swing and misses. The best sliders look like they're strikes, and then they land below the strike zone. So when you throw a slider in the middle of the plate, major league hitters will adjust and eventually hit that ball. So you might need fastballs to move around and put in more precise locations. And even people at Driveline, Tread, these really cutting edge facilities that are behind a lot of the pitch design movement and behind a lot of guys throwing a lot more breaking balls, even people who work there were pretty hesitant to say that sliders would ever actually replace fastballs as baseball's primary pitch. I think the one way that you can kind of get there on a technicality is cutters are actually just sort of the midway point between sliders and fastballs. If you hear about a guy who throws a cut fastball, a cutter, that's pretty much a fastball that has a little bit of slider movement to where it's still able to be commanded, able to be wrangled into the zone. And if you include those as sliders, maybe we get there. If you include them with fastballs, I don't think we ever will. So that's kind of the technicality, is everyone's figuring out how to get a little bit of that bendy, hard to hit bit without totally compromising their ability to throw where they want to.
What's your favorite thing that you have learned that you didn't know? Because so much of what we're talking about is like, there's things about pitching that I didn't know from not pitching. But like when you knew that you wanted to build this guide out of like all the different pitches and how they interact with each other and like what the value is, what's something that like surprised even you as a extreme nerd who watches a lot of baseball and also already had this sort of like basis of knowledge of what these different pitches are?
I think the thing that I started hearing just over and over when I started talking to pitchers about it, started talking to coaches and instructors about it, we all think of pitchers as left-handed or right-handed. You got the lefty, you got the righty. That's it. You might think of like a ground ball guy or a fly ball guy who focuses either on a sinker for grounders, a fly ball for fastballs. But there's a whole other categorization of pitchers that is really important in the game right now, which is natural supinators versus natural pronators. And let me explain what that means. So every coach and player now is working to figure out how a pitcher's body moves most naturally, their motor preferences, as you would call it. And it's a lot like whether you're left-handed or right-handed. You do something and you figure out which one feels right, and that's the one you are. And so supination is if you take your hand and hold it out in front of you like you're dribbling a basketball. If you turn it so that your thumb is pointed up and your palm is pointed in toward your body, that's supination. Pronation is if you go back to the starting point and then tilt it the other way so your thumb is pointing down and your palm is pointed out, that's pronation. And if you thought, wow, pronation feels weird compared to supination, yep, it is. Almost all pitchers are supinators. The vast majority of them are supinators. Supination, when you move your arm like that, that's how you throw a slider, that's how you throw a sweeper, it's how you throw most curveballs, it's how you throw a cutter. Breaking pitches generally work with supination, and so most pitchers who get to the majors are supinators because there are a lot more ways to get there. An awesome changeup is usually a pronator. Devin Williams on the Brewers has one of the best changeups anyone's ever seen, and if you watch a slow-mo of it, it comes out of his hand as if it squirts out from the side where his pinky is, and his hand is tilted that way. That's really hard to do, but that's what they do these tests for, is to figure out if pitchers are natural supinators or natural pronators. And if you bring up any sort of topic like this, a major league pitcher will just pop out and tell you which one he is. And I had no idea that was a thing anyone knew.
Wow. Okay. I feel like we should start there because I find that so interesting and I have a lot of follow-up questions. Also, this is making a lot of sense because remember a couple of years ago when I tried to learn how to pitch and it was like everything I was throwing was like I was over supinating. I am definitely a natural supinator because I could not throw the ball. I could not stay on top of the ball and throw just like a straight fastball. I could only throw supinating breaking balls. So I think that my path to the majors is pretty clear based on that alone.
Only sliders.
We're not going to be able to get it. Like we can't talk about everything that you wrote about, and I'm pretty sure you have more coming. So people should go to Yahoo Sports, read about all the different pitch types. And one of the things, like a little behind the scenes, a little pull back the curtain. One of the things that you and I have talked about while you've been working on this is how the guide to the pitches that you're going to produce as part of this project will be such a useful landing page. That's such like a journalism-y thing to say, but such a useful landing page for other stories that we do about pitching at all, because having an understanding of the pitches themselves will allow you to appreciate like if you were to write an article just about pronation and supination, that would feel really untethered to the game itself if you didn't also understand the value of the different pitches and what the different pitches look like, because then you could be like, oh, okay, yeah, Devin Williams, pronator. That's why they get the So I really encourage people to seek out this big guide that you're putting together, but also like, even if you think you know a lot about baseball, like even if you cover baseball, even if you are been a fan for forever and you feel like you read a lot of high level stuff about pitchers and like what they're working on or whatever, it really is helpful to go back and refamiliarize yourself with the broadest possible pitch arsenal, so that way then you can sort of understand where the progress is being made within there. Like for example, like what we just talked about, like biomechanics is a huge next phase in all of baseball, pitching, hitting, keeping guys on the field, all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's going to be like all sorts of advancements about which guys are more naturally suited to different pitches, not just in pronation and supination. I'm sure they'll come up with a whole new thing. And understanding the pitches themselves will give you a better appreciation for that. So I'm glad that you did this project.
I am, for now, glad I did it. We'll see how I feel after I make 100 GIFs later.
I know that, like, you said something in our meeting yesterday about how, like, you're probably StatCast's most frequent user over the past week, and I wish we could quantify that. I wish they would tell us if you were. All right. Now we're to the part where somebody bandwagons something, and this week we have a guest. We have Natalie Weiner, who is going to tell us not just why you should bandwagon women's college softball, but specifically if you want to jump in at the most possible exciting point, which is right now, what you need to know and how you can appreciate what's coming up. The Women's College World Series starts tomorrow. That's Wednesday, if you're not listening to this on the day that we release it. And so we figured that we should do like a shameless bandwagoner who hasn't been following softball all season primer. But as shameless bandwagoners who haven't been following softball all season, we could not do it alone. And so for that, we have freelance journalist Natalie Weiner, who does pay attention to softball, as well as a bunch of different music topics that she covers. So thank you for joining us and for humoring us in our total lack of softball knowledge, Natalie.
No, of course. Thank you for having me. I mean, honestly, like evangelizing about softball is one of my favorite recreational activities. So
I know that because before you moved away from New York, we once went to a bar to watch softball together.
Hey.
And I thought I should do this more. Okay, so the matchup is set. We have Oklahoma versus Florida State. This is I'm pretty sure, fairly classic powerhouse matchup, but not only that, it is a rematch. So tell us like the history of these two teams facing off, first of all.
Okay. So just for clarification's sake, also, this is the championship series that's starting tomorrow. Technically, this has all been the Women's College World Series, like for the past week. It's confusing. It doesn't because obviously the World Series exists as the World Series, and that's only with 2 teams. So to have it be 8 teams is somewhat confusing. But yes, championship series starts tomorrow. Florida State, Oklahoma. So Florida State won in 2018. That's their most recent softball championship. They've basically been running the ACC, for a long time. Their coach, Lonnie Alameda, she's been there forever. She's awesome. They've just a lot of ACC schools didn't even actually have softball teams until recently. Like Duke and Clemson just added softball recently. So Florida State was kind of like in cruise control in the ACC for a while, and then they would come to the Women's College World Series and compete with other, top teams. Oklahoma is, if you've heard anything about softball this year, you've probably heard about Oklahoma because they're just they're in this dominant space right now. The only real comparison, I think, is UConn women's basketball, circa, I guess now 5 years ago, because they haven't won a championship in 5 years or 6 years now. But they are on that kind of run where it's just you cannot beat them. They're on a 51 game winning streak. Their last loss was in February to Baylor, which was kind of a freakish, weird thing that I wrote about. But anyway, they're going for their 3rd straight national championship. So that's wild. It's been done one time before, but it was in the late 80s and it was UCLA. So totally different sort of zeitgeist for women's sports in general at that point, obviously. So yeah, it's if you look at a statistical category, Oklahoma is on top of it. There is not anything that they are weak at. They are just the best by any measure. And Florida State, they're the number 3 seed. They're no slouch. They came in as a favorite to make it to this point. And like Anna mentioned, these 2 teams faced off in the 2021 Women's College World Series Championship Series. I'm wearing my 2021 Women's College World Series shirt that I got. I wasn't at the championship series, but I did go. And Oklahoma won in 3 games. So Florida State did take 1. Wasn't like they were totally pushed over, but they did ultimately lose to Oklahoma. And a lot of the same players are around on both of those teams, because obviously it wasn't that long ago. So yeah, there's a lot there, but they're both very strong. I'm hoping it goes to 3 games. I'm hoping that we get a competitive series.
Before we get to the players involved, undefeated seems exceptional no matter what, but I'm curious how good a typical best team in college softball is. Is it usually closer to an 800 winning percentage? What is the best team usually like, and how big of a favorite are they usually when we get to this point?
That's a good question. I feel at least over the past few years, it hasn't been the same. Except for Oklahoma. Now, obviously, Oklahoma having been at the top now for 3 to 4 years, and they've won, I think it's 6 titles in the past decade, so they've been pretty dominant for a while. This is a new level that they've reached this particular year, but there is a fair amount of parity at the top. I would say the teams, the top 4 teams typically have a more even shot, I would say, at making it versus the kind of thing that we saw for that long time with women's college basketball, where it was just like, okay, UConn or nobody. It just felt like they were so clearly like in a different tier. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting for me to see the kind of discourse within like women's softball Twitter about Oklahoma, because everyone's super salty about it, like how good they are. And especially because of like the transfer portal, for those not familiar with college sports, obviously now players can transfer kind of at will, which means a lot of the best players just transfer to Oklahoma. They like make their name and then they want to win a title, so they just transfer there. And so everyone's like, well, nobody's ever going to beat Oklahoma. They're going to be good forever and ever and ever. And it's like, well, I just don't think that's true, because I watched UConn women's basketball, be super dominant. Obviously, the transfer portal, not really a factor in the same way, but still, these things don't last forever. They're just like at the top of their game right now.
I had other questions, but now I feel like I got to ask, like, give us, what is Florida State's chance of taking them down? Like, how have they sort of looked so far in the World Series? The World Series being the whole playoff system itself. That gives us like what are they good at? If Oklahoma's good at everything, what is Florida State good at?
They're good. I would say it's kind of like, I don't want to be like it's an intangibles thing, because that's not whatever. That doesn't mean anything. But they are just like tough. They've played a lot of like really good teams over the year, and they've beaten almost all of them. Their game to Oklahoma during the season, this could be wrong, but I think they won 5-4, so it was very close. Like they're really good at base running. Like they steal a ton of bases. They're good at like small ball, they're good at just kind of like forcing the issue and, just staying in it. They actually like lost a game in the regional, which was I was like, what are you guys doing? They lost to like a team they definitely should have beaten, but like they came out of it. And last year they actually got knocked out in the regional, which was a big like, oh my gosh, like blow to the program. Everyone freaks out, whatever. But I think, for all that's just like a TV narrative, it does feel like they're kind of like not going to get spooked, when Oklahoma, does Oklahoma things. They're just going to be like, all right, we're in this. And they do have an awesome pitcher, Catherine Sandercock. She's like, I think 5th-year senior, I want to say. And she just like, she looks extremely unassuming. No offense to Catherine Sandercock, not like she looks bad or anything. She just doesn't look like a person who you would look at and be like, this person is dealing, but she can, and it's awesome to watch, So Oklahoma has fabulous pitching, obviously, but Catherine Sandercock is like who they're going to count on to really be shutting down those Oklahoma batters.
So we're going to call her the Greg Maddux of the tournament. Carry on.
I don't know who Greg Maddux is, but I believe you.
I'm sure that she's like
building bridges.
This person who knows about me and not Greg Maddux. All right, you referenced the discourse a little bit. Catch us up, right? Like the playoff discourse so far. Like if you haven't watched any of the games, but you're going to watch these, like what do we need to know? Who's got beef, who's got like who's like who's doing cool things in these World Series games,
with the caveat that like I'm definitely not as immersed in it as some people, because softball is not like my full-time beat or anything. I think more or less everyone will be rooting against Oklahoma, like everybody from just the way that people do with powerhouses, like the biggest Twitter kerfuffle that I saw was kind of hilarious. This woman, Carol Hutchins, who was the coach at Michigan for a bajillion years. She's kind of like an icon in the sport. She retired, I believe, last year. I don't remember. But anyway, she tweeted, Oklahoma has a 10th man on the field, like accusing like the umps of like, going for Oklahoma, etc. But like to have someone of her stature, like tweeting that obviously is like, everyone's like, what? So that was funny. But yeah, I think in general, it's just kind of like somebody's got to, challenge them. And they have been challenged sort of already. Like Stanford almost beat them yesterday in the it was an elimination game for Stanford. If Stanford had won, they would have had to beat Oklahoma again to make it to the championship series. But it was tied and it went into extras. Their pitcher, Nija Kennedy, is like fantastic. She's a freshman, and she held them to 2 runs in regulation. Like that's wild for Oklahoma. Like nobody does that. It's just Stanford, they had scoring opportunities. They had people in scoring position. They just couldn't bring it home. And it's like, oh, they were so close, but it's okay. Now we get the matchup that I personally predicted and wanted to see in the Women's College World Series Championship Series, Florida State versus Oklahoma. But yeah, I just like this Florida State team. They have a lot of veteran players, and like, with the exception that like I don't like Florida State as a concept for all the like obvious racist reasons. Like, I do love this Florida State team. You know, it's a thing I'm having to like work out with myself.
Zach, do you want to take this as someone who doesn't like Florida State for strange historic childhood reasons?
Well, yeah, I don't like Florida State as a just like cultural institution for the same reasons. But I went to Virginia Tech, and my dad went to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech football is my oldest fandom, and Florida State beat Virginia Tech in the 1999 college football national title game. And I'm still salty about it, and I hold it against them. So I have nothing against the Florida State women's softball team. Okay, I just don't want to root for Florida State.
But you will have to provide some compelling evidence to Zach. So tell us, other than the unassuming pitcher, who else does Florida State have that we should be rooting for?
Oh man, they've just got so Michaela Edenfield, I think you saw the clip of her that went viral, I'm assuming, when she like kissed the ball goodbye after her home run. She is awesome. She's just like so powerful and can just hit basically anything out of the park. And yeah, I hope she takes it to Oklahoma. It'll be really interesting to see like every player on their team. I mean, honestly, like I'm a UW fan because I'm from Seattle. And Florida State, it's honestly like so bad that I'm rooting for Florida State because Florida State beat UW in the 2018 Women's College World Series Championship Series on a wild defensive play that it's very easy to find if you Google Florida State Women's College World Series highlights or whatever. It's like the first thing that like just a crazy, crazy double play. And then last week, they beat UW again on a crazy double play by Josie Muffley. She like jumped like, I don't know, 3 feet in the air or something crazy to like catch. She's the shortstop to catch a ball and then just turn the double play. It was really amazing. I mean, obviously heartbreaking for me, but I was like, this is still very cool to watch. So yeah, I mean, at every part of their lineup, there's just some fun player who's like doing stuff that's crazy. I don't know. Like Oklahoma, the other discoursey thing about them, and again, it's going to sound like I sound so partisan right now, which is very bad. Granted, I'm like not being paid to cover this, so it doesn't really matter. But
that's what this podcast is about. So
yes, right. That is the concept of the podcast.
That's true.
Lean into your partisanship.
Right. So yeah, I'm a partisan, but of course I am impressed by Oklahoma. Of course, what they've done is incredible. Of course, they have a million players who are just like exceptional, you know, changing the game of softball because they're so good. I will say a discoursey thing is like Oklahoma is like doubling down on celebrating, which is like fine. Obviously, I am pro athletes celebrating. Like number one, like yes, you know, talk your if you just did an awesome thing. I don't care. Is it a little bit different when you are the consensus best team in the country by an enormous margin and every single person on your roster is like better than the best team, the best player on like every other roster, you know? Like maybe a little, you know? And like, I don't know, there was a game, I think it was in the super regional. They had a pretty close game against Clemson and like they drew a walk or something and the player like flipped her bat twice. It's like, okay, well, you're Oklahoma and it's just a walk, you know, like you didn't just like win the game. Like somebody replied, like I tweeted about it and somebody replied like, okay, treating drawing a walk like the miracle on ice when you're like the best team in the country, you know, it's just sort of like, it's a little much. Obviously, when you get to the championship series, that kind of stuff, it's like, all right, well, now you have more of a reason to. It's not like a regular season game against like Texas Tech or something, you know, which they have been bringing some of that energy in those games, which if I were their opponents, I would probably be like, okay, is this really necessary? But yeah, I kind of let myself go on a tangent there. But yeah.
That's great. Okay, so that's
moment. A thing to look out for is them like freaking out when they do good stuff. And it's like, well, you always do good stuff. How do you still have the same excitement for it?
How will they feel if, I'm sorry, what's her name? She kisses the
Michaela Edenfield.
Okay, if she kisses the home run goodbye, are they
that would be sick.
Would they be like is Oklahoma like? Do they tolerate other people celebrating at their expense?
They do. I mean, I think that very rare. I don't even know. Like, they're never in a position to like to take that to heart, because they always win. They just
This could be dramatic. Then they've never seen it. They don't know how to react.
Basically, yeah. No, I think if Florida State can take a game, I do think like Oklahoma has such a weird like underdog mentality or something that they've managed to maintain, which makes absolutely no sense. They're like, yeah, we can, we fought through adversity. And it's like, what are you talking about? No, you haven't. Like, you win everything, but that's just like the rhetoric, it's such like coach speak stuff. But yeah, they totally have that. Like everybody does. But I'm more of a Lonnie Alameda head than a Patty Gasso head, as embarrassing as that is to say. But it's okay. I mean, if Oklahoma wins, it's good. It's cool. It's exciting that these players are so good. The only like thing that's dispiriting to me is that this is the best it gets for them. There is no next step. Right. Like there is no, I mean, there are like startup pro softball leagues, but there's nothing that matches the kind of visibility that they have like right now on this stage.
I was at the Olympics and I talked to Jessica Mendoza, who is also at the Olympics to call softball. This was in Tokyo, about exactly that fact, that the feeling of like, she was on the Olympic team, but she was also, of course, a college softball player. And that the college softball World Series, for worse, not for better or for worse, mostly for worse, is the pinnacle. But for viewers this week, it'll be for better. So we have the matchup of the not actual underdogs who think they are, and the actual underdogs.
Right. Slight underdogs. It's not like they're like wild. I don't know. I'm curious what the line would be. I'm sure it'll have Oklahoma like heavily favored, but Florida State is very good. Anyone would agree with that, I think. And I think just more broadly, even apart from these two teams, like if you like baseball and you haven't watched softball, like I feel like it's a treat, because it's just like the game is shorter, everything takes less time because the field is smaller. To me, and again, I'm not like a baseball diehard, but go Mariners, obviously. Like it's easier to watch on TV because the field is smaller. You get a better picture of like how it all kind of comes together. So yeah, I don't know. It's just fun, and these games should be like very high intensity. I hope no blowouts. Oh my God, that would be bad.
I know that, Zach, you are also of the opinion that baseball is better viewed on TV. So I'm going to assign you watching at least one of these games, and then we can talk.
And to be clear, I mean better than watching baseball in person, not better than softball.
Yes,
I have no opinion on
I know that you
yes.
prefer to watch your baseball games on TV, so you'll have to watch a softball game.
I will try out softball on TV and see how it compares.
Okay, Natalie. Plug whichever you want to plug. You got a Substack, you freelance everywhere. Yes. Shout out some publications.
Yes, I am always still on Twitter, even though increasingly that seems like not a good thing. I don't know. Where do we go after Twitter? Still figuring that out. But my handle is just my name, Natalie Weiner. I have a Substack that I recently relaunched with my partner, Marissa Moss. It's about country music. It's called Don't Rock the Inbox. Maybe we'll have to do a special edition about like baseball country walk-up songs. That would be funny. See just how bad they are. But yeah, otherwise I'm just kind of writing all over the place. I usually tweet it out.
That's what Twitter. That's why we're all still stuck on Twitter.
Right.
We haven't figured out a better way to be like, please read what I wrote. People who are not like my friends and family.
But yeah, and go Mariners, although I did just witness them lose like, I don't know, 15-6 or whatever to the Rangers on Saturday.
Yeah.
So that was dark, but it was okay because we were there for my fiance's birthday and he's a Rangers fan. So, it's fine.
Great.
Yeah, he did.
Wow. Okay. Well, he's having a great year. We're actually going to talk about how good the Rangers are. Actually, for purposes of when you're hearing this, we already talked about how great the Rangers are in this podcast. Remember that? Okay. Thank you so much, Natalie. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to Natalie for joining us. That is all that we have this week. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Ram Trucks. We talked so much about what Zach has been working on, so definitely either just go to yahoosports.com or follow him on Twitter at @ZCrizer. I am on Twitter at Hannah R. Kaiser. I also write things. And if you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review. Tell a friend. And we'll be back next week with another episode of The Bandwagon.